So good evening, one and all. We are very excited about this session today by the Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, thank you for accepting our invitation. And Kevin is going to talk about the Bundy murders, a comprehensive history. Kevin is he's a writer of a history and the true crime. He is the author of 15 books, a former investigative journalist for both print and online media, and he is a recognized author for serial sex killer Ted Bundy. Indeed, his breakout book, The Bundy Murders, a comprehensive history, published by McFarland in 2009, was the catalyst that brought him much attention into the true media and true crime world. And after that, even the Netflix published a series on the Ted Bundy book, which is written by Kevin. So
Thank
I welcome Kevin for this, and thank you for accepting our invitation to gather to address this audience. And we have
you.
audience from all over the world, and we have more than 50 countries are participating to hear your talk.
Thank you.
Let me introduce something about the book, what things it is covered by the Kevin. So Kevin is a author, and in this book, he explored the life of Theodore Robert Bundy, and which is known as Ted Bundy, and one of the most infamous and flamboyant American serial killer on record. Bundy's story is a complex mix of psychopathology and criminal investigation and the US legal system. This is a depth examination of Bundy's life and his killing spree that total dozen of the victims drawn from a legal transcript, correspondence, and interview with detectives and the prosecutors. He spent a lot of time to write this book, and using these sources, new information about the several murders is unveiled in the biography of the Bundy, new books, and the Bundy Murders, a Comprehensive History, a second edition. I welcome all the participants. Today we have more than 5,000 participants from 55 countries and the 650 organizations. They all are excited to listen talk. And I have the participants from all these countries. So I welcome you all. And I once again welcome Kevin for accepting our invitation to deliver a session. Kevin, over to you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation. I want to say hello to everybody and in all of the countries. I'm happy to be here. Your interest in Ted Bundy is shared by many people across the world, not just here in the United States. And so I'll give you a little background on myself. My book, The Bundy Murders, A Comprehensive History, was published in 2009, but it was not supposed, I never had any intention about writing about Ted Bundy. It really came about just by chance. Before The Bundy Murders was written, I had only written one book on an American general named George Armstrong Custer. And I was writing, I was not on staff, but I was a contributing writer to a weekly print newspaper called Snitch, which covered issues of crime and the law. And so I was going along, and there's a friend in Louisville. He's passed away now, but his name was Jim Massey, and he worked for probation and parole here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I was aware that Jim Massey had been friends with retired detective Jerry Thompson out of Utah for many years. And he called me one night and he said, listen, Jerry and his wife are coming to Louisville. And Jerry was the lead detective in the Ted Bundy case for Utah. Of course, Bundy began his murders in Washington State. And when that became a hotbed of activity, and we'll get into this more, but he moved to Utah. And it was in Utah, after he had committed a number of murders, really at least eight murders that we know of. And while he was in Utah, he branched out to Colorado and to Idaho. That's where he was exposed. So I knew Jerry was involved with the Bundy case. So what happened was, I told Jim, I said, well, I would love to have dinner with you folks. I appreciate you inviting me. And so I think this was in March of 2005. And so when they arrived in Louisville in May of 2005, I received a call one night, and it was on a Sunday afternoon. He said, we're going to be meeting at such and such restaurant. And I said, okay, well, what time are we meeting? He told me. And before we hung up, before we stopped talking and I hung up the phone, he said to me these words. He said he brought the bag. I said, what bag? He said he brought the bag that Ted Bundy carried. And then from that moment, I knew. I said, I had remembered Jerry had kept Ted Bundy's murder kit after he was executed in Florida. It was just in the evidence room of the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. And Jerry got permission to take that with him and use for like crime, seminars. I believe he took it up to the FBI thing after Bundy's execution. So he's had that murder kit for years. So, when I heard that, I said, hey, Jim, can you meet me a few minutes early at the restaurant so that we can be, I would love to look at this stuff. He said, sure. So we met up there and I parked my car next to his truck and I got out and he was coming around the truck holding this brown leather satchel that was inside of a large plastic bag. And he laid that in the back of the truck and he took it's like a gym bag. He took it out of the plastic bag, and then we started going through the items. And within that kit, there was a ski mask, a rope. There was an orange electrical cord, and Bundy would use that electrical cord for choking people, strangling people. Sometimes he would use a rope, but he liked to use the electrical cord. There were 2 right-handed gloves. There was no left hand. 2 right-handed gloves, and they were different. One was a puffy ski type. The other was a woolen glove with a leather like palm area. And Bundy was left-handed, but we think that because he operated in winter, that for some reason, when he would carry bodies into the woods or drag them, he would drag them with his right hand. In any event, it had 2 right-handed gloves. I said the ski mask. He carried Glad trash bags, a box of Glad bags. When he was arrested, the box originally had 10. He had 7 left. What he would do with the Glad trash bags is that he would never leave a victim with any clothes on her. The only thing that were ever, if a victim was even found, and a number of them were, they were found nude, except for having perhaps a beaded necklace. And so he would use these trash bags to put the clothes of the victims in there, and he would never leave them anywhere near the scene of the crime. He would dump them off down the road. Like, for example, on one murder, Julie Cunningham's, in March of 1975, he said that he took her clothes, and I think he said he put them in a Goodwill dumpster down the road. But a lot of times he would just put them in dumpsters and throw them away. But he didn't want to. This was before DNA, but he didn't want any connection with hairs or any type of fibers, and he knew enough to not leave them with anything on them that might be contaminated with some of his hairs or even maybe a print. So he would get rid of those. So all of these items were in there. He had a red handled ice pick. He had a flashlight. We don't know really what he used the ice pick for. It could have been for picking locks. It's possible. I read a report once that one of the victims may have had a puncture wound in her abdomen, but it's kind of an unusual thing. We don't really know why he used the ice pick, but he, like I say, he had the flashlight, and everything he used had in that kit he would use for murder. So in any event, so I'm looking at this stuff, and so after we get done, we go in the restaurant. The restaurant. I meet Jerry and his wife, very nice people. Jerry passed away about 6 months ago. maybe a little bit longer. But very nice people. We had dinner. We went back to their hotel room, the Breckenridge Inn here in Louisville, and we sat around the pool that night. It was, very nice out, and we just talked about the case. And I knew that meeting Jerry would cause me to write at least an article about it, which would be published in Snitch. Now, Jerry was here in Louisville for about 4 or 5 days. And while he was here, he gave Jim Massey the bag. So on the second or third night after Jerry had come to Louisville, I called Jim up one night and I said, "Hey, Jim, would you mind if I would bring the murder kit to my house? I'd like to take some pictures of it." He said that would be fine. And so I went over there and I picked it up from his house and I put the satchel with all the stuff was in it in passenger seat, and it was already dark. And so as I was driving home, and I think I even say this in the book, that as I would pass under streetlights, I'd look over and it would illuminate that bag. And I thought, this is very surreal. This is very weird, because I'm driving through some streets of a neighborhood, of a darkened neighborhood, as Bundy often did, with the same murder kit that he used to carry, and there's not a museum curator around me or anybody. This thing is just in my possession for a while. So I took it home and I called my wife on my cell phone and I said, "We don't usually have anything on the dining room table." I said, "Clear anything off the dining room table that might be, because I'm bringing Ted Bundy's murder kit into the house." And she wasn't very pleased with that, but she did. And my son-in-law, excuse me, my son-in-law was here, and he helped me arrange this stuff. And I would take various photographs, and 2 of those photographs have been, on the internet for years, and they've been published in books and things like that. They're the only color photographs that I know of the kit out there. But in any event, now the reason why I wrote this book about Bundy is that right before Jerry left, he gave me and he gave Jim one of the Glad trash bags from Ted Bundy's car. It was just a surreal experience. And so I said, "Thank you, Jerry." And I said, "Jerry, would you mind writing a letter of authentication?" He said, "I'll." So he wrote each. And I wrote this article for Snitch, and I provided photographs for it, and I thought that would be it. But then something peculiar to writers started happening. There was something building on the inside of me, and I couldn't get away from it. And I felt like I needed to investigate more. And so after a number of months, I decided to write a book about Ted Bundy. So I had to begin by reading every book out there of the main Bundy books over the next period of months, to see what was in there, to see the story from their perspective, and to make note as to what they published. And after that, I recontacted Jerry Thompson, and in August of 2006, I traveled to Utah to interview him, once again, and obtain case files from the area about those murders, and I did so. So from 2006 until and really I began my time of investigation during the period I had to read all those books and stuff like that. So by the time I got there in August, so the book, I finally ended the book. I was able to complete the book by late summer of 2008, which would make my time of research about 2.5 years. And I have to tell you, I've written 15 books, 14 books since then. And I've never written a book the way I wrote that book. My wife gave up a lot of time with me. It was literally every day, day and night. We'd go out to dinner. I'd get a call from a detective or investigator somewhere. I'd take the call. I'd go back home. I'd begin writing. And so she was very, very nice, and she gave up a lot of time with me. We were living in the same house and we were doing things together, but most of my time was involved in research and writing. and double checking and doing everything that I had to do to produce a good book. Well, what was interesting, halfway along of the writing of the book, I discovered, because I'd read all the previous books, that I was discovering a lot of new information about the case, including several of the murders, information that had never been published before. And I thought, well, this is extremely interesting. And I had a lot of people, some well-meaning friends, back right before I started the book, to tell me that I shouldn't write the book because there's enough books out there on Bundy. But sometimes, and I know all of you can maybe see this in your own life. Sometimes you have to do just what you think you need to do. And it's okay to hear the opinions of others, but in the end, you have to go with what you know on the inside. So I decided to do it. So when I was halfway through the book and I saw how the book was taking shape and how I was finding out new information about these murders and a whole lot of new information, general information about the case, I realized I had something special on my hands. And that's always a nice feeling to get. Because when you start to write a book, you never know how that book is going to be, how it's going to be completed, exactly how well it will be received. That was a little bit of a concern of mine. But anyway, so it turned out to be great. I finished the book, it was published. And of course, nobody really knew who I was at the time. So it took a little while to build, but okay, so over the years, the more people that read it, and a number of influential people read the book, then they could see what I had created. And I also decided early on that I was going to write it from the perspective of if you were traveling along with Bundy, you were there to see it almost like in real time. And instead of a lot of the girls disappearing, outside of my first chapter of the book, which I keep Bundy in the shadows, and I explain this in the preface of why I'm doing that. And from then on, you're traveling right along with Bundy from really his birth and then on up to young adulthood and into, all these, murders. And so it's the way I wrote the book. It's the information that I included in the book. And since that time, I have published 3 companion volumes, all of which contain new information. And many people contact me and have contacted me over the years that knew Bundy. And of course, they all have to be vetted. I don't just take a story from somebody and say, oh, well, you knew Ted Bundy. People, I have to be able to correlate information that validates what they're saying to me. And so in each of the companion books, I've gotten a lot of new testimony from valid people in the backstory of certain things. Like, for example, Carol Bartholomew, there's a famous picture of Bundy. And Carol lived in Utah. And there's this famous picture of Bundy. Bundy's holding a rinsing gun at a party, and this pretty blonde woman is doing dishes, and they're both smiling at the camera. Well, that woman is Carol Bartholomew, and her name, Bartholomew, the guy taking the picture was a man named Win Bartholomew, who's mentioned in my book, The Bundy Murders. And that was before that they were married. They actually started dating, Win and Carol, soon after that picture was taken, and they ended up getting married and having a bunch of kids and grandkids. And unfortunately, Win passed away. But I was able to locate Carol in 2015 when I was doing my second book, which is one of the companion volumes called The Trail of Ted Bundy, Digging Up the Untold Stories. And Carol gave me the full story of that picture and how she met Bundy. And she helped me get in contact with a number of people who knew him and had become good friends of him. Because, in Utah, once the investigation against him started heating up, he ran to the Mormon church to become, kind of accepted by them. He was looking for a place of comfort, not because he was suddenly becoming religious and wanted to believe in God. That wasn't it at all. He was looking to just get away from the heat of the investigation. And she put me in touch with a number of people. And one fellow I spoke to named Larry Anderson, and he's in the book, the Trail of Ted Bundy. Larry was good friends with Bundy. And he said to me, he said, several days after Bundy was executed, one of the national magazines came to me, offered me a lot of money to talk about Bundy. He said, but I just refused to do it. I didn't want to. So here I come along 20 years later. He doesn't ask for any money from me, and he's willing to talk to me. And so his story is in there. So since the Bundy Murders was published in 2009, in 2015, I was doing the research for the trail of Ted Bundy. Then there was a second companion volume, which was the Bundy Secrets. Then the third companion volume turned out to be Ted Bundy's Murderous Mysteries. And just as that book was published, a fella contacted me and said, have you ever thought about writing an encyclopedia of the Ted Bundy murders? I said, my publisher just published this other book, fourth book. I just finished a book on Bundy. I wasn't at all interested. But when I ran past my publisher, several days later, they thought that sounds like a good idea. And I really couldn't say it wasn't, because there wasn't an encyclopedia out there of the crimes. And this is a voluminous case covering many states and hundreds of people. So I thought, well, you know what? Maybe it's a good idea. So I wrote that. I'm doing a sixth and final Bundy book right now, and there won't be any more after that. And once I complete this, I will have written in the neighborhood of 1,500 pages, maybe 1,600 pages, and that's a lot of writing about one man and one case. But in any event, so it's been a long journey, and I would not want to have to write the Bundy murders again. It took a lot out of me emotionally. The crimes are very dark. You feel like you get to know the victims very well. A lot of them were my age, and if they were alive today, they would be, no doubt grandmothers. I've got grandchildren, I've had children, and they would, no doubt, most of them would be here. But all that was voided and taken away because of Ted Bundy. Now, what I'd like to do is go over this. I'm titling this lecture, that's just the introduction, but I'm titling this lecture, Ted Bundy, Evolution of a Killer. And I'd like to give you some points. I mean, this is a subject that whenever I speak on Ted Bundy, I could go not hours, I could go days, but we don't have days, we have an hour. So I wanna give some interesting points about him. I'll be discussing his MO, and I will be discussing, since Bundy was if nothing else, he was an exceedingly good planner of murder, especially when he was in Washington State, because that was his home, excuse me, his home, and he was a very good planner of murder. But we're going to be going over the murders briefly, and I'll be showing you some things about how Bundy's confidence level as a murderer would increase over time, and how he went from attacking only in darkness to doing it in broad daylight, and then returning again to mostly attacks within the darkness. I'd like to cover his MO, just to give you an idea. I was told by Bill Hagmeyer, who was the FBI agent who worked with Bundy for the last several years of his life, to get to know him, befriend him, to learn about the murders, the things he did, why he did them, and just whatever information he could gain from having a relationship with Ted Bundy. I remember Bill Hagmeyer told me one day when I was interviewing him on the phone, he said, some of my FBI buddies couldn't understand why I was getting so close to Ted Bundy. I said, don't tell me you had to explain that to them. It was hard for me to believe that they wouldn't understand why he was doing it. But here's what Bill told me. Bundy's MO basically stayed the same. And of course, you have to remember that Ted Bundy was a serious sex, and everything that he would do with victims or parts of victims would always include sex. Always. Now, sometimes Bundy would rape a woman prior to her death, but that was not always the case. He would always, almost always, if not always, rape a woman from behind while he strangled her to death. The intercourse could be anal or vaginal. It could be both. But he would strangle them from behind as he was having sex with them. And of course, because he was a necrophile, he would have sexual activity with the corpse or perhaps a part of a corpse, because we know he took heads home to his apartment. He admitted to Bill Hagmeyer he had 4 heads in Washington State at one time. Bundy did not like to talk about the necrophilia. He would talk about it a little, but he didn't want to delve into it a lot, but he would occasionally refer to it and comment upon it. But this is what he did. And so everything that he did with victims would include the sex. And so his basic MO was strangling them from behind while having sex with them. Now, so that would be his MO. He was born on November 24th, 1946 to his mother, Louise Cowell. They believe his father, and this is up for grabs really, but I think they're right, but they believe that his father was a sailor from World War II by the name of Jack Worthington. I've seen a picture of Worthington, and there do seem to be some similarities in bone structure of the face and the nose, but we don't know for sure. That was a real sticking point with Bundy. He never could really get over the fact that he was illegitimate, that he really didn't know who his dad was. But when he was 4, Louise moved to Browns Point in Washington State, which was just outside of Tacoma. After a time, she met a man named Johnny Bundy, who was a cook at the Madigan Hospital out there, and they were married. And from that union, and I will say this, Ted Bundy was adopted by him. He was not, Johnny Bundy actually gave him his name. He adopted him. So he wasn't his stepdad. He was his adoptive father. And from that union with Louise, they had 4 additional children. And so Bundy grew up with, and he was the oldest, obviously, but he grew up with these 4 siblings. Now, a lot of people want to blame the Bundy family, which is absurd, for the problems that Ted Bundy had. Nobody knows. Listen, this is one thing you have to understand. No matter what brain function, no matter what changes that we can absolutely see when certain tests are done on serial killers as to changes within the brain, they can never get to the place as to why these people become this way. And I don't think they ever will. And I also believe that there is an element called evil, that some people at some point in lives, they turn themselves over. So it's almost a mystery. He's an enigma as to why he became the way he became. But in any event, Bundy's childhood appears to be relatively normal. He would tell a writer later, he would say that as he grew up, he had 2 really good friends, Terry Storwick and Warren Dodge. He and Dodge were born on the same day, and I believe Warren was like 20 minutes, ahead of him. He's 20 minutes older. And they were really good friends, the 3 of them. But at the same time, even though Bundy wouldn't mention it then, with them apparently, and as he grew up, he didn't really know how to relate to people or how to be a friend. He could go through the motions, but he knew he was different. This is why I say in the Bundy murders that before Ted Bundy did all of these terrible, terrible things, he was a victim of his own circumstances. He was actually the first victim. Now, Bundy's responsible for everything he did, but you've got to feel sorry about a youth that's growing up that feels so different and unsure of himself. But where you stop the caring and start the judging is when they turn from the mixed up youth to a predator, a homicidal predator, as Ted Bundy became. But that's what he did. And so people talk about, when did his murder start? Well, we know that he launched himself, and this is a big part of my book. He launched himself in the full-time murder in the early, I like to say, the dawn of 1974. And that's when he launched into it. That launch in the murder at the dawn of 1974, Bundy knew, whether he talked about it to himself or not, he knew he was launching himself in the full-time murder, and he was not going to stop for any reason unless he was captured or killed. The question has always been, did he kill before then? He did kill before then. We don't know how many. We don't know exactly who they were. He did admit to Bob Campbell that he killed a hitchhiker in Tumwater, that he picked up in Tumwater, Washington, which is south of Seattle, in 1973. He then made a mistake and said he killed in 72, and then quickly backtracked with Campbell. Now, he admitted to killing 11 in Washington State, but he would only own up to the names of 8. So there's 3 other out there. Who are those 3? We don't know. But I believe that because Bundy had no trouble confessing to the murders of women who were college-age women, he did not want to talk about the murders of young girls, preteens. We know he killed 2 that were 12 years old, Lynette Culver out of Pocatello, Idaho, and also his last victim, Kimberly Leach, was 12 years old. He may have killed them as early as 10 years old. We don't know. I've got case files. I've got reports in my case files of the Bundy case, and I've got just thousands and thousands and thousands of pages that describe certain abductions of young girls in the area where Bundy was at the time that he was operating, and it makes me wonder. So we do know he had a thing for mostly killing college-age women, but he would kill teens and preteens as well. Those murders he did not want to talk about. Now, Bundy planned for murder years in advance. And I say in the book, The Bundy Murders, that there was a time when he crossed from fantasy to reality. And that was a barrier he crossed. And when he did it, of course, he never came back. Now, we talked about maybe 1973 murders, 1972 murder. He might have killed earlier than that. He could have killed back east in 1969. Some people think he may have killed little Anne Marie Burr in Tacoma when he was 14. She was 8. We don't know. He always denied that murder, but he did allude to it to a criminologist from Louisville, Dr. Ron Holmes. And Holmes told me the same thing he told the Tacoma News Tribune in a 1987 article, that Bundy basically admitted to it, but in the third person, and he connected himself with it. And so we don't know, but we do know that in 1974, he launched himself in a full-time murder. So in 1974, he attacked a woman at night. He wasn't wanting to do daytime attacks, which seems natural for someone that is just, starting out, as it were, and wanting to hunt women. But he attacked a woman by the name of Karen Sparks. I use another name in my book. Years ago, somebody told me that Sparks was not a real name anyway. After publication, years later, I found out it was. But I think I call her Terry Caldwell in my book, The Bundy Murders. In any event, he beat her severely, and he rammed a medical device called a speculum up her vagina. And I know when he left her, she had a basement apartment. She lived with a bunch of other men in a rooming house. She lived in a basement apartment, and he was able to get in. And no doubt through the door being unlocked. A lot of times it was left unlocked. But he beat her severely, and she wasn't even found until many, many hours later by her roommates. These guys looked in on her, and she was all bloody, and she appeared to be near death. Well, Bundy must have made a decision after that, because I'm sure when he left her place, he thought, well, she's going to die. She did not, and she was in a coma for 10 days, spent 30 days in the hospital. But then he attacked Linda Ann Healy in her rooming house in the early morning hours of February 1st, 1974. And this is the most bizarre abduction I've ever heard of. Again, it's in the middle of the night. It's at a rooming house in a university district. You know how young kids are, college kids. They can be walking around at 3 a.m. He chokes her into submission. She's asleep. He attacks her and starts strangling her. This is what he told the writer later. It created a nosebleed. There was no beating on her with a crowbar or anything. There's no splatter pattern of blood in a room. There's only a pool of blood on the bed where it was running. So it's consistent. The blood pattern evidence in the Healy room is consistent with what Bundy said, that when he was strangling her, she woke up, but she was soon unconscious. It created a nosebleed, and it ran on either side of her on to the bed. Well, so what does Bundy do? Now, there's another apartment in the basement of this house. Karen Scavene is on the other side of Bundy it's separated by a partition of plywood. There's 2 rooms in the basement. There's more girls upstairs. He takes her off the bed. He takes her nightie off, hangs it up in the closet. He makes the bed almost like in a military fashion, better than even Linda Ann Healy could make her bed. And he takes a red backpack, probably has some clothes, but he may have put a sheet over her or something. He carries her up the steps in a university district, probably around 2:30 a.m., 3 a.m., in the middle of the night, and carries her to his car. And I'm sure she regained consciousness, and he murdered her and dumped her remains. But it was at night. Now, that to me is the strangest abduction I have ever heard of. On March 12th, he attacked Donna Manson at Evergreen State College. Sundown on March 12th was around, because I checked this, it was around 7:10 p.m. She left her dorm, and really, I've been to Evergreen State College. It's a nice college, and what's cool about it, it was built in this big, vast forest of fir trees, and they have these trails that run from dormitories and other areas, and you're encased in trees, and you're moving through the campus a lot of times on these trails encased in trees, and it's very nice. There's a lot of nature to it, but when Bundy saw it for the first time, he must have been overwhelmed with delight, because it's the kinds he would like to hunt. So it was getting dark, and she had a very short walk, maybe a couple hundred yards through this trail, and she was going to a jazz concert. And no one ever knew where the jazz concert was on campus, but I discovered when I was doing research in 2015 that the jazz concert was being held at the library. So we know what trail she had to have taken to get there. The question is, did Bundy encounter her on the trail and attack her, or did he lure her away? When you leave the trail, you open up into an area of campus that is more open, where you're more likely to see people, but nobody reported seeing her. And so they know she never made it into the library, and the jazz concert was on the first floor. She would have been seen, so she never made it. But Bundy got her. And he wouldn't, when he was doing his end of life confessions, he would tell some things about some murders, others he would not talk about. Then on April 17th, he traveled across the Cascade Mountains to CWSC, which is Central Washington State College, and he was hunting there. Somebody that I know did spot him at around 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m. With a sling on his arm. So he was allowing himself to be seen in daylight, but he didn't get Susan Rancourt until a little, around 10 p.m., maybe a little after 10 that night. Now, Kathy Parks, Bundy would later say that he traveled to Oregon, and he went to Oregon State University on May 6th. He was asked by a writer, he said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "Well, I kind of wanted to throw off the police." So he goes down to Oregon State University, and I've been there, and he entered the cafeteria before 11 p.m. and he ran into Kathy Parks. And he, of course, Bundy was a very articulate, friendly. Most women thought he was a handsome guy. He convinced her to leave with him. She did. She was having all kinds of problems, and you'll read about her case and all of these cases in my book, The Bundy Murders, but she left with him, okay? And it was terrible because she thought she could trust him. And Bundy said that once he got beyond the, he said he had to make copies of something for his school, that he was a student there. And he overpowered her once he got away from, prying eyes and the campus. And he took her then, drove back 250 miles back to Seattle, took her back to the place where he would murder her. And he said basically that was done to throw off the police. Again, in the middle of the night. So that was May 6th. On June 11th, he was able to abduct George Ann Hawkins again in a university district along Greek Row. He encountered her in the alley, and time won't permit to give all the things about it, but he convinced her to go to a deserted parking lot. He was hobbling on crutches. He had a leg cast on. She walked with him the block and a half. She had to get back to her Spanish. She wanted to be studying her Spanish test. Walked to this deserted parking lot. No doubt when she was putting the crutches, he was on these crutches in the car, he picked up a crowbar from behind the right portion. When I say right, the driver's side, it to your right, it would be the passenger side. He had a crowbar underneath there. And as she's doing this, he picked that crowbar up and he hit her. And he hit her with such force that she came out of one of her shoes and both of her earrings flew off. And Bundy would have to go back to this location and on a bike. And it's 1 block down from where that heavy police activity is the next day, because that's where she was last seen. And he was able to retrieve these items. If the police would have spotted this, they would have roped that off immediately if they would have seen a woman's shoe in the parking lot, because it's very close to where she was. And that would, but they never spotted it. So Bundy was growing as a killer. He was a very arrogant man. He felt like he could do anything. He was smarter than the police. So I think he overstepped his boundaries because on June 14th of 1974, it was a beautiful day. And Lake Sammamish State Park is outside of Seattle, east of it. And that's about a 40-minute drive, I believe. And in the morning, beautiful day, 40,000 people were there at this park. I've been there. It's a beautiful place to come with your family. Beautiful lake. It's just very nice. Even and there were company businesses there. The police were even having a function there, their own function party. He convinced Janice Ott to leave with him that morning. What he did was he took her up to the hills of Issaquah and he bound her. It's my personal opinion. He probably, after sexually attacking her, he bound her to a tree. Some people think maybe he was in a cabin somewhere. That's a possibility. But we also know that some things which will come out in the 6th book, that I can't talk about everything right now, but it kind of lends to the thing that he was probably binding her to a tree and gagging her. In any event, he abducted her before noon, took her to this location. We don't know where it is. But I think he was trying to make a statement that day, because he then went back to the park. This is very bold stuff. He was a very bold killer. And he convinces Denise Naslin to leave with him about 4:30. Now, police suspected that maybe Ott was alive, but they couldn't prove it. So Bill Hagmeyer talked to Bundy about that. And Bundy admitted that he had kept Ott alive and that he brought Denise Naslin back, and the one, saw the other. Both of these women knew, they were terrified what was no doubt in store for them. And this, we have no evidence that Bundy would ever physically torture anybody. Many times he would want them out cold so that he was a predator, a private predator. He would do what he would want with these women before they were dead, as they were dying, and afterwards. And he didn't want anything going on with them. A lot of times they would be unconscious, but there were some times when he wanted to bring psychological torture to the victims. And this was one of those days. And what he told Hagmeyer is that he killed one in front of the other. And if you can imagine the terror in the one who had to watch the murder of the other one, knowing that that was her fate and there was no way she was going to get out of it. He wasn't always that way, but there were times when he was that way, and it depended on what he wanted at any one moment. However, a lot of activity came out later, and from Lake Sammamish, they began looking. They made composite drawings because other women wouldn't go with Bundy. One woman walked with him to his car, but decided not to go with him. He had asked for help with a sailboat. He used the ruse of, can you help me with my sailboat because my arm was hurting? He had it in a sling. She said, well, there's no boat. And she said, there was no boat, no trailer to put it on. He said, oh, it's up at my parents' house at Issaquah. Well, I can't go. I can't go with you. I'm meeting my husband and family. He said, okay, I'm sorry. And he walked her back. And then that was it. He found another victim. Okay. So people saw him. People saw where his car was parked. So they knew he drove a beige Volkswagen or a light brown Volkswagen. And they also knew that this guy identified himself as Ted. Now, I believe Bundy may have been rethinking this later. He wasn't too worried about it, it doesn't seem. But it is interesting to note that after Lake Sammamish, he went back to nighttime abductions for a while. He moved to Utah, and he abducted, and I'll quickly go through this so we can have a question and answer time. But he abducted Nancy Wilcox at night. Sunset there was at 7:08 p.m. He got her after that, maybe closer to 9 o'clock. Melissa Smith, who was the daughter of Chief Lewis Smith of Midvale, Utah, and all these cities, Murray, Midvale, they're all kind of like one big conglomerate. Okay, it's one big metropolitan area of Salt Lake City that runs I-15 runs through there, and State Street. I-15 is the freeway, but State Street runs through these little cities. He was able to abduct her. I found a woman who I interviewed for my book, The Bundy Secrets, who actually knew Bundy and saw him this very night of October 18th, about an hour and a half before he abducted Melissa Smith. And instead of being the really talkative Bundy, she said that she walked in and she was meeting some of her girlfriends at a bar, and they were just going to, sit around, talk, have drinks. As she was going in there, she saw Bundy he was sitting on a bar stool. He was sipping a drink. Well, very often Bundy would jumpstart himself in the murder through the use of alcohol. I've always wondered why he needed to do that, because he's a very diabolical man, the things he would do to victims. But apparently he didn't need that to jumpstart himself. And in any event, she noticed he wasn't as talkative. He seemed kind of down, but he was already progressing into that altered state of murder. And he was jumpstarting himself by drinking alcohol. Anyway, so they just exchanged a couple of words. She went off, sat at her table. She said the next time she looked over, he was gone. And within about an hour and a half, and only about a mile and a half away, or maybe just a few blocks, I can't remember, I'd have to check my own book, but he encountered a Melissa Smith. And what we think happened is that he went to this place called the Pepperoni Pizza, and she had gone there to meet a friend who worked there. And as she left, Bundy got into his car, followed her, and was able to attack her and abduct her. And again, that was the daughter of Chief Lewis Smith, and Chief Lewis Smith, very good friends with Jerry Thompson of the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office, and in fact would turn the investigation over to Jerry soon after. Okay, so then we have on November 8th, we have the abduction. sunset on November 8th was 5:16 p.m. Bundy encountered Carol DeRanch at the Fashion Place Mall it was after 7 p.m. And soon after that, and this is the only woman that we know of that actually got away from Bundy, he got her in the Volkswagen. He turned around, went down to like the back of the mall, and he turned left. And within about a minute, he stopped at a place called the McMillan Elementary School and he attacked her. He was attempting. Carol can't remember. I saw her on the Netflix doc, and she had mentioned that Bundy had got one handcuff on the right wrist and left the other dangling. But what he actually did was he attacked her, put the handcuff on the right wrist, attempted to put the handcuff on the left wrist, actually locked it on the same wrist, which makes the handcuffs obviously useless. She started fighting with him and she was able to get out of the car. Now we know he clipped both handcuffs to the right wrist because her report says, and the detective said, when she got here, she got away from Bundy. An old couple picked her up. She was the only person to ever escape from Bundy that we know of that has been validated. It doesn't matter what other women are coming forward now. It doesn't matter. The only validated one we have that escaped Ted Bundy, no matter what happened in those other cases, because they never came forward till years later, is this lady, Carol DeRanch. Well, they got Carol to the police station, and the detective had to remove, and he noted in his report, both handcuffs from the right wrist. But in any event, he missed her. And then here he is in this altered state of murder, and he's not going to go home without a victim. So he jumps in his car. He remembers that the Bountiful High School, the Viewmont High School in Bountiful, he had picked up a brochure 2 weeks earlier about a play going on there. So he heads up to Bountiful. This is a Friday night. He parks in the western parking lot of Bountiful School. He encounters one woman. You know, she doesn't do what he says. She gets away. So he goes in there and exposes himself to 1,500 people in the auditorium and in the hall in front of the auditorium, all these people, to abduct one. He finally is able to abduct Deborah Kent as she's leaving to pick up her brother because the play ran late. And the whole family couldn't leave to pick him up. He was at a roller skating rink. And Bundy grabs her and abducts her and, of course, murders her. Okay, so he's back to these nighttime attacks. Then you have, after that, he starts killing. He drove himself out of Seattle. I mean, out of Washington State because of all these murders. He found his new killing ground in Utah. And then from there, he branches out to Colorado and Idaho. So on January 12th, he kills Karen Campbell, a nurse from Michigan that's come to the Wildwood Inn. Of course, I found out some additional information about that. And so my book, The Bundy Murders, has just been republished for a second edition. So I have that new information in there about how he actually got Karen. But it was at night. Sunset on March 15th of 1975 was about, let's see, that would be about 5:05 p.m. Probably was able to convince Karen Campbell to go with him to the parking lot around maybe 7:30. So it's dark. It's exceedingly cold. It's exceedingly cold. Nobody else is out there. He overwhelms her. He knocks her out, puts her in the his VW. Off he goes down to Owl Creek Road, 2.8 miles from the Wildwood Inn, sexually attacks her and kills her. He bashed her in the head and knocked her out. He had sex with her, and he dumped her body right next to the road. He didn't really go very far to dump the body. And she actually died of not just the cranial damage, but exposure. She's nude. And it's like she froze to death. She probably would have died anyway, but it didn't matter. Bundy was finished with her, and he discarded her. Then you have the abduction of Julie Cunningham on March 15th. Again, sundown there was 7:12 p.m. And this was probably 9 o'clock as he got her. Okay. Then you have Denise Oliverson. Now, this is the first daylight abduction, which is going to be in Grand Junction, Colorado. daylight abduction that we know of that was a successful abduction since Lake Sammamish. He got her in the late afternoon. Then he did another daylight abduction in Pocatello, Idaho on May 6th, which is the 1-year anniversary of the Kathy Parks killing in 74. But on May 6, 1975, and this is the one case where I found a lot of new information about her death, her murder, that most people did not know. And he got her around noon, okay? And then, of course, he abducted what they say, Jane Curtis, who was walking back from her room at Provo. She was at Provo. She was at Brigham Young University in Provo at a youth conference. She was a young kid. She wasn't a student there, and she had traveled from Bountiful to this youth conference, and they were having a dinner. And she had these braces on. She wanted to take care of her teeth, so she walked back a quarter mile to her place where she was staying, her dorm. And they say she disappeared in the fading light, so it was almost dark. She had again a quarter-mile walk on her way back to her friends at this dinner they were having. She just wanted to brush her teeth and take care of her teeth, and she was never seen again. Bundy admitted to her murder right there at the end. And I left out the October 31st abduction of Laura Ann Amy, and she was also in the middle of the night. So Bundy, it looks like Bundy went back to the nighttime attacks. He never talked about it, but I think he believes he overstepped his boundaries, as it were, by attacking somebody, those two women at Lake Sammamish in the middle of the day. We've gone farther. I can see, I feel like I've just touched the surface of this stuff, but this will give you an idea of Bundy the hunter, his MO, and how these things worked out with him. So we're at 9:50. Well, in my time, we're 2 minutes to being finished. But if anybody had a quick question, I'd be more than happy to answer.
So thank you so much, Kevin, for elaborating Bundy life in such a manner. So I request the audience, those who wants to ask any question, participants, so they can raise their question. Radhika, yes.
Good morning, everyone. So I just had one question. You said Bundy did not like to talk about the murders of preteens and teenage girls. Like you said that we know at least 2 who were murdered, but there could be more. So I was wondering, what does that suggest that maybe he was feeling guilty about it, or like you said in the end, like he overstepped? What do you think suggests Bundy?
Well, I think my phone glitched a little bit, but you're talking about the others that you say people he would not admit to, or some people like to say his true murder count. I can tell you that he admitted to 30. The authorities can really place him at maybe 36 murders, and some people have made what I call the absurd claim that it could have gone to 100. Here's what I think. Bundy made veiled references, speaking in the third person of a serial killer. And he used to, when he would confess about other killers, he was really talking about himself. He said this person may have killed up to, half a dozen teenagers. I personally think that it goes beyond 36. It's probably in the low 40s, his victim count. And, 43, 44, 42, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Could it go higher? It's possible, but I don't necessarily think so. But he was very prolific. But again, the younger the victim, the less he wanted to talk about it. And he didn't want to talk about the murder. I will tell you this, that when Lynette Culver was murdered, he had picked her up at her, junior high or middle school. And he drove her back to the Holiday Inn where he had a room. He had come to Pocatello the day before, May 5th of 1975, to hunt college-age women. But I found out, nobody had ever written about this. I found out, though, that even though it was May, it was still exceedingly cold and they were having snow showers. So Bundy's normal ruse of getting people, talking to women, slowing them down, wanting to act like he's hobbling or something, whatever ruse. They weren't interested. They were going to their cars. It was still cold. So he picked up this girl the next day that's 12, took her back to his hotel room, and he ended up drowning her in the bathtub. I don't know whether she was conscious or unconscious, but he did admit to the investigator when they went back and saw him, and I know we're running out of time, but they asked him about that. He said, he did admit, he said, and oh, by the way, I had sex with her after she was dead. So he admitted that. He didn't always want to come out and admit it, but he did, but he did in that case.
Yes.
Thank you
I
so
hope
much.
that answered the question. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you
Yes,
so much, Dr. Kevin, for such a nice and enlightening lecture. And it was something which is really, very valuable for a professional like me who is into legal vertical. So,
Thank you very much.
my pleasure, sir. My question is that was whatever acts and offenses that Bundy did, was it just related to his damaged background, or was it just a mere senseless killing, or there was some logic involved in that?
That's an excellent question. Bob Keppel said, it's hard for people to understand, but Bundy he was a man that thought about murder, what we say here in the United States, 24/7, meaning 24 hours in every day, 7 days a week. For some reason, when he was growing up, we don't know when he decided to harm females. He was a fractured personality. We don't know why. There were things in his youth that spoke of him being different, but he was not a predator, obviously, of people. Where did that begin? We're not sure. But at some point, Bundy would take his fantasies. Most people that, boys grow up, they think about women, they think about girls, they just naturally want to think about sex. And most people that do that just think about having sex and they don't want to harm people. Somewhere along the lines, Bundy would take sexual fantasies and, for a reason we do not know, would mix violence and domination with that. And we don't know. It seems very abnormal to us because it is abnormal. He's like a lion that's become a man eater and he's in a cage somewhere. I mean, we view him and we can understand him, but at some point he decided he wanted to harm women and murder them and have sex with them after they were dead. Where that came from, we don't know. We do know, again, he had a fractured personality. Some things were seen as a youth that bothered some of his family members. But for the most part, he appeared to be normal as he grew up. So that's again, it's the what we call the $64,000 question. We don't know why he became what he became. He just did. And so as he got going in this murder and as he went farther into murder, he was never going to come back. He had transformed himself into this, what we like to call a monster. He's so unlike anybody else. Most people walking the planet don't ever feel this way or think this way or do these things. And we kind of stand back at him and look at him as an aberration. And it's a very strange thing. So we don't know exactly what the cause is, but we do know that he just loved to murder and sex was always going to be involved with it. A very twisted mind, very twisted individual. I hope that answers that.
Yeah, even the similar question was asked by many YouTube people like Bindya Goyal, Vaishali Sinha, Naren Tawar, Christian. So they all want to know about the motive behind the murder, all the murder. Is there any motive behind all the murders? So I think you have answered this.
There was no motive. The only motive behind the Ted Bundy murders was his desire to possess and destroy these women. There was no motive like I've got to kill her because, she can identify me. You know, some people say that Bundy may have gone out and occasionally committed rapes with no intention to kill. He even spoke of that. He said that it was in his intention with Nancy Wilcox on October 2nd of 74 was to rape her only. I find that to be probably a lie based on some things about it and some things he would have experienced during that attack. But that's what he said. He said, and, you know, and Bundy did speak of once, but he laughed about it with Stephen Michaud, the writer, about being in his Reformation period where he was trying to reform himself, but even found that kind of funny when he talked about it. The truth of the matter is that it would be very hard for Bundy to have reformed himself from anything, because his MO is to murder women and use them and sexually abuse them and use them after death. And it was all about him. And he loved that above all things. And there was no motive behind it other than that. So I hope it very self-centered. And listen, he once made a comment. He said, I don't know what the big deal is. You know, if one or two people go missing here or there are so many people missing in the world. You know, there's so many people in the world. But I say in the book, The Bundy Murders, but the detectives that were pressed to solve these cases were thinking of really little else. They were thinking about these girls all the time. But that was Bundy's view of these women. They were to be used and thrown away. Bundy did make the statement once. He said, I never hurt anyone that I know. And I believe he meant that because it came out when he was exceedingly tired in Florida after he was captured. And he said that to Don Patchen. I met with Patchen. I've seen his original notes. And he, you know, Steve Bothaford heard that of the Leon County Sheriff's Office. So, yeah, he said, I don't hurt people that I know. And what's odd is he still wanted to maintain a relationship, a normal, what he would call normal, sexual relationship with a woman. And he was with Liz Kendall for, 6 years, but he wasn't true to her. He always had girlfriends on the side. So his level of commitment there was not the level of commitment one would find in a normal person. It's the best, I guess, he could do as a psychopath.
Chika, you can ask your question.
I'm sorry?
I'm just requesting one participant named Chika.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the lecture.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, was there, how was he caught? Because you said something like there was no DNA at the time when the murder started. So how was he captured? Thank you.
He was first captured in Utah because Carol DeRanch survived that attack of November 8th of 1974, and she identified him. And with that, there were others that identified him as being after he lost Carol when he went to Viewmont High School. After the Carol DeRanch abduction went bad, he was identified by people being there, and so they knew that he was involved with the abduction of Deborah Kent, but he was on trial for the kidnapping of Carol DeRanch. So the more evidence that came out about Bundy as things went on, what you had a number of investigators knowing this is the guy. This is the guy. He's from the Seattle area. He's the one that was killing all these women. So he finally got a 1 to 15 year prison sentence for the abduction of Carol DeRanch. But then he was transferred to Colorado, and he was taken there by Mike Fisher. And I know Mike well. He was a Colorado investigator. And Fisher, and along with Jerry Thompson, warned the jailers in Colorado, you got to watch this guy. He wants to escape, and he's a killer of women, and he's on trial. He's going to be on trial here in Colorado for the murder of Karen Campbell. Well, he escapes from the Aspen courthouse, which is really the Pitkin County courthouse in Aspen. He gets captured 7 days later. He escapes again from not the Aspen courthouse, but down in the Glenwood Springs jail. it's a one-story deal, and there was a light fixture that was not welded, and he was just, if you've never heard this, this is going to be hard to believe. But he gets up in the ductwork system of this jail at night, and he's looking for a way to escape. He's just investigating. The prisoners are telling the guards, we hear Bundy going up in the ductwork, and crawling around at night. We think he's trying to escape. You need to do something about it. They didn't do anything about it. Bundy escaped this way one night and got away, made his way to Florida, came through my hometown of Louisville, made his way to Florida, and of course, committed those murders down there and then was captured down there. So down there they had, and I don't know how well this is received today, but he had bitten the buttocks, I think of Linda Levy in the Chi Omega sorority house. He bit one of them, and they were able to photograph that on her, and then they were able to take impressions from his teeth, and they matched perfectly. So they had that against him, but there was a weight of circumstantial evidence. And in Florida, they had a lot of evidence against him because he was caught with these stolen credit cards, and they were able to match him up at various places. So yeah, so again, this is 1978, and DNA being what it is, it didn't come along until later, but they were certainly able to match Bundy to the van that he murdered that girl in, that his last victim, Kim Leach, through fibers from her clothes, from his clothes, the carpet fibers in the van. And so there was a lot of connecting evidence that way.
Surya, Pragya, you can ask your question.
Hey, thanks, Kevin, for enlightening us with this valuable information.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Sure. So one question I have now, Bundy, if you really see, I think he is having some kind of narcissistic personality disorder, which I believe there are many other serial killers of his age and his demeanor also would definitely have. Now, there are two questions. In fact, I think one question, if you can answer that would be great. There are several serial killers either at that time or even after he was executed. Even now, also, if you see across US, there are many serial killers who have the similar personality disorder. So has FBI or any such governing authority across US have documented those results from the analysis of Ted Bundy's, whatever analysis they have made on him, to help reduce or to help predict the possibility of such incidents to happen in future? That's one question.
Yes.
And the other one is very short.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. So
okay.
The second.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. They did a study on Bundy. I mean, first of all, they after he was executed, they wanted to look at his brain. They didn't find any abnormalities. There were no physical or physiological abnormalities in his brain or in anything. There was nothing in him that pointed to anything that could have contributed to what he became. What they did learn from Bundy is, and this is really for the people that interviewed him, the FBI people and the work that Bill Hagmeyer did, they did get a lot of information, as they have from other serial killers, as to what has motivated these people. And they've learned a lot, and you'll see these in the reports as to what they think causes these people to murder. They don't know why exactly they do it, but they follow certain patterns as to, and I found something interesting in the record. There are various serial killers and various murderers that talk about, they have an odd thing that goes on within their brain. As a number of them have said, as they were committing the murder, they feel like that they, in essence, would step back from themselves, and they were more viewers of it than actual participants in the murder. Now, I don't think Bundy ever said that, but you're talking about killers across the board. A number of them have said that. Now, they don't know why. this occurs. There are also, Dr. Al Carlisle told me, neurotransmitter changes that occurs within the eyes moments before an attack on a woman occurs. And you can kind of see this in Bundy as well. Well, people that talked to him when he asked for help, his eyes were clear and seemed normal. However, on the way to his car, which means that in Bundy's mind, he just about has what he wants. She's just about there to be his victim. She turns to him and sees his eyes have changed and they become weird. They were not the same as when she talked to him moments before. Those are neurotransmitter things, changes within the eyes. Stephen Michaud said that even though Bundy had blue eyes, and this is really strange, that when he would talk to Bundy, and at times when Bundy was describing the murder, those blue eyes could change, the pupils could change to black. Now, I don't know if they know what causes that, but these are the particular changes that are observed in people who go this direction and murder other people. It is a fascinating subject to delve into, but again, what does it get to? Do they ever get to the place where they know why these people do this? And they still do not have those answers, no.
Manmeet Kaur, you can ask your question.
I'm sorry?
Manmeet?
I'm sorry, did you say Bundy?
No, I'm saying Manmeet, a participant. She wants to ask.
You know, my phone is, oh yeah, go ahead.
I think she is not audible. So Abhaya, you can ask your question.
Yes.
Hello. Good morning, sir. Thank you for this session. I want to ask two questions. First question is whether any efforts were made by the prosecutor to prove him insane in the court proceeding. And second question was, what were the strong points that were used, or the statements used by the Ted Bundy in the court proceeding to prove his point, or to prove that what were the strong reasons to commit those crimes?
Okay, you know, my phone was breaking up there. There was a lot of something going on. If you could speak slower and just maybe repeat that, please.
Okay. Sir, my question is whether efforts were made to prove him insane in the court.
Oh, prove insane. Okay.
In the court.
Okay, I got that. Okay.
Okay. And second question is, what were the strong statements given Ted Bundy to decrease the punishment or to save himself?
Okay. Okay. Let me handle the insane question first. In the United States, can be mentally ill, but legally sane. The definition of legal insanity would be different than legal, obviously, sanity. Someone who is sane and is out committing murder, if they are trying to do it clandestinely, like in a clandestine manner, to keep it secret, to keep it hidden, if they understand that it is against the mores of society, or if it is, if they don't keep it hidden, they're going to be arrested and prosecuted and perhaps executed, as in the case of Ted Bundy. When a killer understands that, no matter how dark and diabolical that killer is, then you would have to say that they are legally sane. If they are legally sane, then they can be tried in a court of law. Now, there are a number of killers that are proven to be legally insane, and they are not tried here in the United States. And I've covered some of these cases. I also wrote about a man named Richard Chase, who was called the Vampire of Sacramento, being Sacramento, California. And without question, Richard Chase was mentally ill, deeply disturbed, deeply mentally disturbed, perhaps even schizophrenic, and had been schizophrenic at one time. At the same time, he was fully understanding that the crimes he was committing, the murders he was committing, were against the law, that he would be prosecuted, arrested, and prosecuted, and he could face the death penalty in San Quentin prison under the laws of California. He understood that. So the prosecutor told me in this case, it was really easy to prove him legally sane. Now, even though you and I would look at Richard Chase and go, this man is crazy. Bundy would look at Richard Chase and say, that man is crazy. But if you look at Ted Bundy, what man severs heads, female heads, and takes them back to his apartment to have sex with them? You have to be crazy. You're not normal. You're not normal to want to have sex with a female dead body. But he was not, you could see Bundy knew exactly who he was. He, unlike Richard Chase believed his blood was turning to powder. He needed to replenish that with the blood of other people. He really believed that. He was mentally ill, but he was legally sane, and so was Bundy. But Bundy would look at Richard Chase and he would say, he's crazy. Okay, he'd be right too, but not in a legal sense. So there's a definition there. And my phone was doing something. I couldn't hear the second question. I'll try to answer that quickly.
So I'm going to take the last question from Terry.
Okay.
Terry,
okay.
You can ask your question.
Hi, Kevin. Good morning. It's Terry Armenta from Southern California. And hi, everybody. Good evening to all who are still here in our conference. I have a quick question, Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
Regarding the bite mark evidence, as a forensic professional myself, if that was in today's setting and bite mark evidence was thrown out because of everything that we know about evidence, what do you think, your professional opinion, what do you think the case would have gone on, given that although the bite mark evidence was presented, but it could not be presented in court? I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Right. If forensic evidence were lacking with Bundy, there was so much, I don't know where they would find a jury that would not convict Bundy based on all the eyewitness testimony of putting him near these girls when they disappeared. Everything just seemed to add up. But you're right, forensically, they couldn't do it. But people have asked me, if Bundy were here today, would he kill? He would absolutely kill. Here's what he would not be doing. Bundy said, those that I buried were never located. He would bury every body. He would also, and I hate to be graphic, but he would, when he had sex with them, he would not be ejaculating in them because he wouldn't want to leave that evidence. There are certain things he would do. Can you imagine trying to operate today with all the cell phones, with all the cameras in cities and all the technology we have? Bundy would not have stopped killing. He would have refined it. He would have done it another way. So forensically, they didn't have a lot on Bundy, but circumstantially, they had some out, including the eyewitnesses. So in the end, I think, in fact, I will tell you this. I was interviewing a detective in Florida, and here's what he told me. It's all on tape. He said, turn off your tape recorder. I did so. This particular detective said, look, I got a call. And I was told by somebody else in law enforcement, if for some reason Bundy gets off, you're going to receive a call that we found a body along the highway. It'll be Ted Bundy, and you'll take the investigation from there. He said, okay. There was no way Bundy was going to leave Florida alive. That's kind of a roundabout way to answer your question. But forensically, there wasn't a lot to connect Bundy, but circumstantially, there was just a tremendous amount of evidence, and everybody knew he was the, he was the guy. I hope that answers your question.
As we have come with the end of time, and I request all the participants that will share one feedback form where you can ask your question. I'll share that form with Kevin, and he will answer all the questions. So moving towards the next, I will request Kevin to accept our certificate of appreciation for delivering such a knowledgeable session, and it is well taken by the audience. And there are lots of questions through the YouTube, through the Facebook, through this live chat. But due to the time limitations, we have taken a few questions. But definitely, we are going to take more questions in a later stage. So I would like my team to thanks for putting their effort, Ravi, Kailash, Sudhakar, Nitika, to reaching people, making their certificates, and the dedicated team to posting all the content on the social media, Pratika, Vaishnavi, Lakshya, Pooja, Janita, and Tanya. So they all are posting and reaching to you all. So I like to give the certificate of appreciation to my volunteer team, Pratika, Vaishnavi, Tanya, Janita, Lakshya, and Pooja, Kailash, Sudhakar, and Nitika. So I also like to thank all the people who supported us in this cause. Many of them said that their name we should not announce. So this we have not given the few names here, but few names here we have supported. These people have supported us. Thank you so much for your support. And as before that, this international lecture series we started and with the aim to conduct one lecture on every Sunday. So for the next Sunday, I just want to announce that this kind of certificate all the participant will get, and bearing the sign of the Kevin. For the next Sunday, I'm going to announce that the next Sunday we have on topic unusual work accident forensic challenges in evidence collection. And Terry is here. I'm glad that Terry has accepted our invitation. And I request Terry to say a few words about this talk as an opening, and soon you will get the registration form and other things. So you all are welcome on the next Sunday. So I just want Kevin and Terry to give a few glimpses about her talk on next Sunday. Terry, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to preview a case that happened here in Southern California that includes a unique way, if you will, to collect major parts of evidence that are related to a decedent that happened in the workplace, outdoor workplace. So I hope all of you that are here tonight, as well as you, Kevin, in the morning, please join us. I think it'll be informative. It will be.
Thank you for the invitation. I'll see if I can do that.
Yeah. So be entertaining such a way to see how that particular case was, the evidence was collected. I'm looking really forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much, Kevin, for such an informative talk. And it was a long awaited talk. People are looking. I like to Kevin to give a concluding remark.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, we'll see you. Bye-bye.